A sad jobless Luna gave all her money to a poor homeless beggar. Unaware, he is a powerful alpha. The rain hammered against the cracked pavement of downtown Seattle, turning the streets into rivers of reflected neon and despair. Luna Martinez pressed herself deeper into the doorway of an abandoned bookstore, her threadbare coat doing little to shield her from the November cold. 6 months ago, she'd had everything: a steady job as a graphic designer, a small but cozy apartment in Capitol Hill, and enough savings to feel secure. Now, she had $17.43 to her name, a cardboard box of belongings in a storage unit she could no longer afford, and a pink slip that had shattered her world like glass. The tech startup where she'd worked had collapsed overnight, taking with it not just her job, but her entire department's severance pay in a bankruptcy filing. She'd spent weeks sending out resumes, attending interviews, watching her savings evaporate like morning fog. Her landlord had been patient, then firm, then legally decisive. The eviction notice had arrived on the same day her mother called from Tucson, voice trembling, to say the medical bills from her father's heart surgery were drowning them. Luna had sent them her last $1,000 without hesitation, leaving herself with barely enough for food. If you're watching this story unfold, please subscribe and leave a comment telling us where you're from. It helps us keep bringing you these stories tonight. Huddled in that doorway with rain soaking through her shoes, Luna felt the weight of every bad decision, every stroke of bad luck, every moment that had led her here. She pulled the crumpled bills from her pocket and counted them again, as if the numbers might somehow change. $17.43, enough for maybe 3 more days of cheap meals if she was careful. Enough to get her through until the temp agency called with something, anything. The figure emerged from the rain like a ghost, shuffling slowly down the sidewalk. Luna noticed him because everyone else seemed determined not to. Pedestrians gave him a wide berth, crossing the street to avoid him. He was tall but hunched, wearing layers of tattered clothing that hung from his frame like funeral shrouds. A thick, unkempt beard obscured most of his face, and his hair fell in matted tangles past his shoulders. He moved with the careful, measured steps of someone whose body hurt, whose spirit had been ground down by the city's indifference. He stopped about 10 feet from her doorway, settling onto the wet concrete with a groan that carried years of pain. Luna watched as he pulled a piece of cardboard over his head, trying to create some meager shelter from the downpour. His hands trembled as he arranged his few possessions around him: a plastic bag, a water bottle, what looked like a bundle of old newspapers. Something twisted in Luna's chest. She recognized that look, that posture of defeat. She'd seen it in her bathroom mirror that morning. Here was someone whose circumstances had beaten him down further than even her own, someone who had no doorway to shelter in, no storage unit with belongings, no family to call, even if pride would allow it. Her fingers closed around the bills in her pocket. The rational part of her brain screamed warnings. She needed this money. She had her own survival to worry about. She couldn't save everyone. But Luna had never been good at listening to the rational part of her brain, not when her heart was involved. Her mother had always said it was both her greatest strength and her most dangerous weakness. Before she could talk herself out of it, Luna stepped out into the rain. The cold water immediately soaked through her coat, but she barely noticed. She approached the man slowly, not wanting to startle him. Up close, she could see the grime on his clothes, the hollowness in his cheeks, the way his eyes seemed to look at something far beyond the physical world around him. "Excuse me," Luna said softly, crouching down to his level. "I know this isn't much, but I want you to have this." She held out the bills and coins, her entire worldly wealth displayed in her palm. The man's eyes focused on her face, and for just a moment, Luna saw something flicker there. Surprise, perhaps, or confusion. His eyes were a striking grey blue, incongruous against the dirt and desperation of his appearance. "Miss, I can't—" His voice was rough like gravel rolling down a mountainside, but there was an unexpected refinement to his words, a hint of education buried beneath the street's influence. "Please," Luna interrupted, pressing the money into his calloused hand. "I know what it's like to be hungry, to be cold, to wonder if tomorrow's going to come. You need this more than I do right now. Get yourself something hot to eat, okay? And maybe find somewhere drier than this to sleep tonight." The man stared at the money, then back at her face. Something in his expression shifted, softened. "What's your name?" he asked quietly. "Luna. Luna Martinez." He closed his fingers around the bills, and Luna could have sworn she saw his hand shaking, for reasons that had nothing to do with the cold. "Thank you, Luna Martinez. You have no idea what you've just done." "I've given you $17.43, Luna said with a sad smile. "It's not going to change the world, but maybe it'll get you through tonight, that's something." She stood up, feeling suddenly exhausted, her legs weak. The adrenaline that had pushed her across that rain-soaked pavement was fading, leaving behind the reality of what she'd just done. She had given away everything, and now she had nothing. Not a safety net, not a backup plan, not even bus fare. "Wait!" the man called out as she turned to go. "Your coat. You're soaking wet." "I'll be fine," Luna lied, walking back to her doorway. "Take care of yourself." She settled back into her spot, wrapping her arms around herself, trying to preserve what little warmth remained in her body. Across the way, the homeless man was still watching her, that strange intensity in his eyes. Luna closed her own eyes, fighting back tears. What had she done? How was she going to survive now? The next morning arrived grey and miserable. The rain reduced to a persistent drizzle. Luna had dozed fitfully through the night, jerking awake every time someone passed by, her body stiff and aching from the cold. When she finally gave up on rest and opened her eyes, the homeless man was gone. In his place was only a wet patch of pavement and a crumpled piece of newspaper. She spent the day walking, trying to stay warm through movement. The temp agency she visited had nothing for her. The shelter she tried was full. By evening she was back in her doorway, wondering if this was how people slipped through the cracks, not all at once, but degree by degree, compromise by compromise, until they simply disappeared. Luna Martinez? The voice was completely different from the gravel-rough tone of the previous night. Luna looked up to find a tall man in an expensive charcoal suit standing before her, an umbrella keeping the drizzle at bay. He was clean-shaven, his dark hair perfectly styled, his grey-blue eyes sharp and assessing. Everything about him screamed power and wealth. "Yes?" Luna struggled to her feet, confused and wary. "My name is Alexander Steele. I'm the CEO of Steele Industries. I'd like to speak with you about a position at my company." Luna blinked, certain she was hallucinating from hunger and exhaustion. "I'm sorry, what?" Alexander's lips twitched into something that might have been a smile. "I'm offering you a job, Ms. Martinez. Director of Community Outreach for our new charitable division. Salary of $150,000 per year, full benefits, housing allowance included. I'd like you to start Monday." "This is a joke," Luna said flatly. "I don't know who put you up to this, but it's cruel." "It's not a joke." Alexander reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card, extending it to her. "Last night you gave a homeless man everything you had. You showed more compassion in that one moment than most people show in a lifetime. That's the kind of person I want leading my charitable initiatives." Luna's hand trembled as she took the card. The paper was heavy, expensive. "Last night you were... That was you? The man on the street?" "Yes." Alexander's expression grew serious. "I've been homeless for the past 3 months, Ms. Martinez. A research project of sorts, though that makes it sound more clinical than it was. I wanted to understand the systems I was planning to help, to experience firsthand what it meant to be invisible in this city. Last night was supposed to be my final night before I returned to my life. And then you gave me everything." Luna felt tears burning at the corners of her eyes. "I don't understand. Why would you do that? Why would someone with your resources put themselves through that?" "Because wealth and power create distance," Alexander said quietly. "They insulate you from reality. My father built Steele Industries from nothing, and when he died last year, he left me everything, along with a challenge. He told me that if I wanted to truly honor his legacy, I needed to understand suffering before I could effectively address it. So I did what terrified me most. I walked away from everything and lived on these streets." He paused, his eyes distant. "I've been spit on, ignored, mocked and threatened. I felt hunger that gnawed at my insides, and cold that seeped into my bones. I've experienced the soul-crushing invisibility of being someone that society has decided doesn't matter. But last night, when I was at my lowest point, ready to give up on this entire experiment and humanity along with it, you appeared. You saw me. You gave me not just money, but recognition of my humanity. Luna shook her head, trying to process everything. Mr. Steele, I appreciate this, but I can't accept charity. I don't want to be someone's feel-good story or project. This isn't charity, Alexander said firmly. I need someone who understands poverty not as an abstract concept but as a lived reality. Someone who knows what it means to make impossible choices. Someone who has the courage and compassion to give even when they have nothing left to give. You're uniquely qualified for this position, Ms. Martinez. The question is whether you're willing to take it. Luna looked down at her hands, raw and red from the cold. Pride warred with desperation, but beneath both was something else, a small flame of hope she'd thought had been completely extinguished. I don't even know what a director of community outreach does. Neither do I, Alexander admitted. We'll figure it out together. I can tell you what I envision. Programs that actually address homelessness at its roots, job training initiatives that consider the whole person, housing projects that maintain dignity. But I need someone who can ensure we're not just throwing money at problems, someone who can keep me honest when my perspective becomes too removed from reality. He held out his hand. What do you say, Luna Martinez? Will you help me build something that actually matters? Luna stared at his outstretched hand for a long moment. This could be a trick, a scam, something too good to be true. But she'd spent the last 6 months learning that sometimes life took everything away. And if that could happen, couldn't the reverse also be true? Couldn't circumstances shift in the other direction just as dramatically? She reached out and shook his hand. His grip was firm, warm and somehow reassuring. I'll do it, but I have conditions. Alexander's eyebrow rose. Go on. First, if I think any program we're developing is performative bullshit, I get to say so without worrying about being fired. Second, we hire people who've experienced homelessness themselves. They should be part of the solution, not just recipients of it. And third, my first month's salary goes to covering my parents' medical bills. A genuine smile spread across Alexander's face. Done, done, and done. Though I'd like to add a fourth condition, you let me advance you that salary today so you can get a hotel room and a decent meal. Consider it a signing bonus. Luna felt tears spilling down her cheeks now, unable to hold them back. Why are you doing this? Really? Alexander's expression grew somber. Because for 3 months hundreds of people walked past me. They looked through me like I was invisible. Some pretended I didn't exist. Others actively avoided me. A few were cruel. But you, Luna Martinez, when you had every reason to protect yourself and your own survival, chose compassion instead. That's rarer than any skill set or degree. That's what I need. He paused, his voice dropping. And because I want to build something that would have seen me last night, the real me, the man under the dirt and despair, and offered help anyway. I want to create systems that recognize humanity regardless of circumstances. Can you help me do that? Luna nodded, unable to speak, past the lump in her throat. Good. Now, let's get you out of this rain. Alexander gestured to a black car that had pulled up to the curb, its driver waiting patiently. We have a lot of work to do. As Luna climbed into the warm interior of the vehicle, she looked back at the doorway that had been her shelter. 12 hours ago, she'd had nothing. She'd given away her last $17.43 to a stranger, fully expecting to face an even bleaker tomorrow. But in that moment of compassion, when she'd chosen to see another person's suffering despite her own, she'd somehow planted seeds she never knew existed. The car pulled away from the curb, carrying Luna toward a future she couldn't have imagined. Through the window, she watched the streets of Seattle slide past, the same streets that had been so harsh just hours ago. They looked different now, full of possibility rather than threat. I need to tell you something, Alexander said, pulling her attention back inside the car. This isn't going to be easy. The work we're undertaking, the systems we're trying to build, there are going to be people who resist it, bureaucrats who don't want change, cynics who don't believe in what we're doing. Even people we're trying to help who've been let down so many times they can't trust anymore. I understand, Luna said. Nothing worth doing is easy. There's something else. Alexander's jaw tightened slightly. My board of directors doesn't know about my 3 months on the streets. They think I've been taking a sabbatical to deal with my father's death. When they find out what I've been doing, and when they learn I'm creating an entirely new division based on that experience, there's going to be resistance. Some of them will see it as reckless, others as a waste of company resources. You need to know what you're walking into. Luna considered this, turning to meet his gaze directly. Mr. Steele, last night I was sleeping in a doorway with no money, no home and no prospects. Today I have a job, a purpose, and a chance to help people who are going through what I just went through. Whatever resistance we face, I can handle it. The question is, can you? Alexander laughed, a genuine sound that transformed his serious face. I think I made the right choice with you, Ms. Martinez. Call me Luna. If we're going to be working together, we might as well be on a first-name basis. Luna, then, and I'm Alexander, though most people call me Alex. The car pulled up in front of a boutique hotel in downtown Seattle. Alexander walked Luna inside, where the warm lobby felt like paradise after the previous night's cold. At the front desk, he arranged for a suite, handing Luna a credit card. This is for you. Get whatever you need, clothes, food, toiletries. Consider it part of your signing package. Tomorrow we'll start the paperwork and find you an apartment. Luna clutched the card, feeling its weight like a lifeline. Alex, I don't know how to thank you. You already did, he said simply. Last night, when you saw me, when you gave me everything, that's all the thanks I need. After Alexander left, Luna took the elevator up to her room. The suite was larger than the apartment she'd been evicted from, with a king-sized bed that looked impossibly soft, and a bathroom with a tub deep enough to drown in. She stood in the center of the space, overwhelmed by the contrast between her circumstances now and just 12 hours ago. Her phone buzzed. The battery was at 3%, but there was a text from her mother. Mija, the hospital is asking about the bill again. I hate to bother you, but they're threatening collections. Luna's throat tightened. Before she could second-guess herself, she called Alexander. He answered on the first ring. Luna, is something wrong with the room? No, the room is perfect. Alex, you mentioned advancing my first month's salary. Can we do that tonight? And can you make it a direct payment to Seattle General Hospital instead of to me? There was a pause. Your parents. My father's heart surgery, they're drowning in bills. Give me the account information. I'll handle it within the hour. And Luna? That's not coming from your salary. Consider it part of your hiring package. Employee, family, medical support. Alex, I can't. You can, and you will. We're building a company culture that takes care of people and their families. You're the first beneficiary. Now get some rest. We have a big day tomorrow. After they hung up, Luna sent her mother the hospital's information, then ran a bath so hot it made her skin turn pink. As she sank into the water, feeling the warmth seep into her cold, stiffened muscles, she finally let herself cry. Not tears of despair this time, but tears of relief, gratitude, and overwhelming emotion. She thought about the series of choices that had led her here. Losing her job, being evicted, sending her last savings to her parents, giving her final dollars to a stranger. Each decision had felt like a step deeper into darkness, but that last choice, that moment of compassion when she had every reason to be selfish, had somehow been the thread that led her back to light. Luna stayed in the bath until the water cooled, then wrapped herself in the hotel's plush robe and ordered room service. When the food arrived, a burger and fries that tasted like heaven, she ate slowly, savoring every bite. Her phone buzzed again. Another text from her mother. Mija, the hospital just called. Someone paid the entire bill. They said it was through your new employer? What's going on? Are you okay? Luna smiled through fresh tears and typed back, Everything's going to be okay, Mama. I'll explain soon. Tell Papa I love him. And the bills are taken care of, all of them. She fell asleep that night in the enormous bed, warm and fed and safe, with Alexander's business card on the nightstand beside her. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new responsibilities, and undoubtedly new struggles. But tonight, She allowed herself to feel what she hadn't felt in months: hope. The Monday morning sun broke through Seattle's perpetual cloud cover, casting unexpected brightness through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Steel Industries' executive floor. Luna stood in front of those windows, wearing a new suit that Alexander had arranged to be delivered to her hotel room, trying not to feel like an imposter. The building stretched 43 stories high, glass and steel reaching toward the sky, each floor humming with the activity of a tech empire built on innovation and ambition. "Ready?" Alexander appeared beside her, also in a suit, though his was clearly custom-tailored, and worn with the ease of someone born to wealth. "No," Luna admitted. "But I don't think I'll ever be ready, so we might as well do this now." They entered a conference room where 12 people waited around a massive table. These were the board members, the executives, the people who'd helped build Steel Industries into a multi-billion-dollar corporation. Their eyes tracked Luna with expressions ranging from curiosity to skepticism to barely concealed hostility. "Ladies and gentlemen," Alexander began, standing at the head of the table with Luna beside him, "I'd like to introduce you to Luna Martinez, our new Director of Community Outreach. She'll be heading up a new charitable division I'm establishing, focused on addressing homelessness and poverty in Seattle, and eventually throughout our other markets." A man in his 60s with silver hair and a granite expression leaned forward. "Alexander, we've discussed charitable giving. We already donate millions through established foundations. Why do we need an entire division for this?" "Because writing checks isn't enough, Richard," Alexander replied evenly. "Because the systems we have aren't working, and we have the resources to innovate in this space, just like we do in technology." A woman across the table, her red hair pulled back severely, spoke up. "With all due respect, Mr. Steele, what are Ms. Martinez's qualifications for this position? I don't see her resume in the materials you sent." Luna felt her stomach drop, but Alexander's hand touched her elbow briefly, a reassuring gesture. "That's a fair question, Patricia. Luna's qualifications are unique. 6 days ago, she was homeless and jobless, down to her last $17. She gave that money to a stranger she thought needed it more than she did. That stranger was me." The room erupted. Multiple board members tried to speak at once, their voices rising in a cacophony of confusion and concern. "You were what?" Richard demanded. "Alexander, please tell me this is some kind of joke," Patricia said, her face pale. "Have you lost your mind?" another voice called out. Alexander raised his hand, and the room gradually fell silent. When he spoke, his voice carried an authority that Luna had only glimpsed before. "For the past 3 months, I've been living on the streets of Seattle, homeless, anonymous, experiencing firsthand the systems, or lack thereof, that exist for our city's most vulnerable population." He walked slowly around the table as he spoke. "I've slept in doorways and under bridges. I've eaten from dumpsters and been turned away from shelters. I've been ignored, mocked, and treated as invisible by thousands of people. I did this because my father challenged me to understand suffering before I could effectively address it. And I'm here to tell you that what I learned was both humbling and infuriating." Alexander stopped behind Luna's chair, placing his hands on the back of it. "Our current systems are designed to manage homelessness, not solve it. They're band-aids on bullet wounds. We can do better. We must do better. And Luna Martinez is the person who will help us do it." Richard's face had gone from granite to storm cloud. "Alexander, I understand you're still processing your father's death, but this is beyond reckless. You've put yourself in danger, you've worried your family, and now you want to restructure company priorities based on a 3-month experience. And you want to put someone with no executive experience in charge of a major initiative." "Someone with no executive experience," Luna said, surprising herself by speaking up, "but someone who knows what it's like to fall through the cracks. Someone who understands that the people we're trying to help aren't statistics or problems to be managed. They're individuals with stories and dignity and potential." She stood up, meeting the eyes of each board member. "I lost my job when my company went bankrupt. I lost my apartment. I sent my last savings to help my parents with medical bills. And yes, I ended up in a doorway in the rain with nothing. I understand that doesn't make me qualified to run a division of $1 billion company by traditional metrics. Luna took a breath, steadying herself. But I also understand something you might not. I know what it feels like to be invisible. I know the shame of asking for help and being turned away. I know the impossible calculations people make when they have to choose between food and medicine, between rent and utilities. And I know that until we design systems with actual empathy, with understanding of what people are going through, we'll just keep perpetuating cycles of poverty. Patricia's expression had softened slightly. Ms. Martinez, your experience is certainly valuable, but surely you can see why we're concerned about the scope of what's being proposed here. I can, Luna acknowledged, and I'm not suggesting we rush into anything. Alexander and I have talked about starting with pilot programs, testing approaches, gathering data. This isn't about feel-good charity. It's about finding effective solutions and then scaling them. We want to be as strategic about addressing poverty as this company is about developing technology. She glanced at Alexander, who nodded encouragingly. I'm proposing we start with 3 initiatives. First, a job training and placement program that provides not just skills, but also addresses the barriers that keep people unemployed. Things like lack of childcare, transportation, appropriate clothing. Second, a housing-first program that recognizes you can't solve other life problems when you're worried about where you'll sleep. And third, a partnership with existing social services to identify gaps and inefficiencies. Richard was shaking his head. The costs of this would be astronomical. The costs of doing nothing are higher, Alexander countered. Every year, Seattle spends millions on emergency services for the homeless population, hospital visits, police interactions, emergency shelter. We're already paying for the problem. We're just not investing in solutions. What I'm proposing is that steel industries take the lead in innovating in this space. A younger board member, someone Luna hadn't heard speak yet, leaned forward. I have a question for Ms. Martinez. You mentioned barriers to employment. What would you say is the single biggest barrier you encountered? Luna thought carefully. Perception. When you're struggling, people see the struggling first and the person second. I'd walk into interviews and could feel the moment they noticed my worn-out shoes or wrinkled clothes. Suddenly, I wasn't a graphic designer with 5 years of experience. I was someone suspicious, someone risky. The barrier isn't always lack of skills or unwillingness to work. It's that we've created a society where visible poverty disqualifies you from opportunity. The room fell quiet. Luna could see wheels turning behind various sets of eyes, calculations being made, perspectives shifting. I propose we give this 6 months, Patricia said finally. 6 months with a defined budget and clear metrics for success. If Luna can demonstrate meaningful progress, we'll discuss expansion. If not, we revisit the entire initiative. Richard looked like he wanted to argue, but several other board members were nodding. I'll support that, one of them said, but I want quarterly reports, not just a 6-month review. Done, Alexander said immediately. Luna, are those terms acceptable to you? Luna felt the weight of every eye in the room. 6 months to prove herself, to prove that compassion could be strategic, that investing in people wasn't just ethical but effective. 6 months to show that the faith Alexander had placed in her wasn't misplaced. Yes, she said firmly, those terms are acceptable. The meeting continued for another hour, hashing out details of budget, reporting structure, and timeline. By the time it ended, Luna's head was spinning with financial projections, staffing considerations, and the magnitude of what she'd agreed to. As the board members filed out, several paused to shake her hand, their expressions ranging from encouraging to skeptical. When the room finally emptied, leaving just Luna and Alexander, she collapsed into a chair. That was terrifying. You did well, Alexander said, sitting across from her. Better than well. You stood your ground and articulated a vision. That's what leadership looks like. Alex, what if I can't do this? What if I fail? Then we'll fail together and we'll learn from it. He leaned forward, his expression serious. Luna, I didn't choose you because I thought you'd guarantee success. I chose you because you have something that can't be taught or faked. You have perspective and compassion born from experience. Everything else, management skills, strategic thinking, executive presence, those can be learned. Over the next several weeks, Luna threw herself into work with an intensity that surprised even her. She started by assembling a team, making good on her promise to hire people who'd experienced homelessness themselves. Her first hire was Marcus, a former software engineer who'd lost everything to addiction and fought his way back. Her second was Sarah, a single mother who'd lived in her car for 8 months while working 2 jobs. Her third was James, a veteran who'd struggled with PTSD and system navigation after leaving the military. Together, they began mapping the existing landscape of social services in Seattle. They conducted interviews with homeless individuals, shelter workers, social workers, and healthcare providers. Luna spent long days in the field and late nights analyzing data, looking for patterns and opportunities. The work was exhausting and often heartbreaking. Every interview revealed another person's story of how quickly life could unravel, how inadequate existing systems were, how many people fell through cracks that seemed impossibly wide once you knew to look for them. One evening, Luna was working late in her new office, a modest space she'd insisted on, refusing the executive floor initially offered, when Alexander knocked on her door. "You're here late," he observed, settling into the chair across from her desk. "I'm always here late. There's too much to do." "Luna, you can't solve everything in a month. I'm not trying to solve everything." She rubbed her tired eyes. "I'm trying to understand everything. There's a difference." Alexander was quiet for a moment. "Can I tell you something? Something I haven't told anyone else about those 3 months on the streets?" Luna nodded, sensing this was important. "There was a night, about 6 weeks in, when I almost quit. I was so cold, so hungry, so utterly defeated that I was ready to call my security detail and go home. I'd proven whatever point I needed to prove, experienced whatever I needed to experience. I was done." He looked out the window at the Seattle skyline. "But then I thought about my father, about how he'd built this company from nothing, how he'd known poverty not as an experiment, but as his reality. And I realized that if I quit when things got hard, I'd be proving I never really understood at all. The luxury of quitting, that's the difference between choosing poverty and being trapped in it." "What made you keep going?" Luna asked softly. "Anger, mostly. Anger at myself for my privilege, at a system that allows people to suffer, at my own prior ignorance. And hope, irrational. Stubborn hope that if I could just understand deeply enough, I could help change things." He met her eyes. "The same things I see driving you." Luna felt tears threatening. "I see their faces, Alex. Every person I interview, every story I hear. I keep thinking, now that could have been me, that was almost me. If you hadn't been in that spot that night, if I'd walked a different street, if any number of small things had been different. But they weren't different, and now you're in a position to help. That's not luck, Luna. That's purpose." They sat in comfortable silence for a while before Alexander stood. "Go home. Get some rest. This is a marathon, not a sprint." After he left, Luna gathered her things but paused at her office window. Below, the streets of Seattle stretched out, thousands of lives playing out in apartments and houses, in doorways and under bridges. Somewhere down there, someone was having the worst night of their life. Somewhere, someone was making the kind of desperate choice she'd made 2 months ago. She thought about the $17.43 she'd given away, and how that single act of compassion had somehow transformed her entire life. It seemed impossible, too neat, too much like a fairy tale. But it had happened. Luna pulled out her phone and called her mother. "Mija, I was just thinking about you. Your father wants to know when you're coming to visit." "Soon, Mama. How's he feeling?" "Good. The doctors say his recovery is ahead of schedule. No more worries about the bills thanks to your new job." "Mija, I still can't believe everything that's happened. It's like a miracle." Luna smiled, watching the city lights. "Maybe it is, Mama. Or maybe it's just proof that kindness matters even when it doesn't make sense, especially when it doesn't make sense." They talked for a few more minutes before Luna hung up and headed home, to the small apartment Steel Industries had helped her secure, nothing fancy but clean and warm and hers. As she walked through the building's lobby, she passed a young woman sitting on a bench, a backpack at her feet and exhaustion in her eyes. The woman looked up briefly, and their eyes met. Luna saw herself in that look, remembered that feeling of being on the edge, of not knowing what came next. She paused, reaching into her purse for her wallet. "Excuse me," Luna said, approaching carefully. "Are you okay? Do you need help?" The young woman's eyes filled with tears. "I'm sorry, I'm not loitering. I just needed to sit down for a minute." "You're not loitering. Here." Luna pulled out a business card and $50. "My name is Luna Martinez. I run a program that helps people who are struggling. Call this number tomorrow, okay? We can help with housing, job placement, whatever you need." The woman took the card and money with shaking hands. "I don't. Why are you doing this?" "Because someone did it for me when I needed it most. Because kindness is a circle, not a line." Luna squeezed the woman's shoulder gently. "You're going to be okay, I promise. Just call that number." As Luna walked away, she felt Alexander's words echo in her mind. That's not luck, that's purpose. Maybe he was right. Maybe every hardship she'd endured, every moment of despair and struggle, had been preparing her for exactly this, to be the person who could see suffering and respond not with pity, but with understanding, not with charity, but with dignity. The work ahead was enormous, the challenges daunting, the possibility of failure very real. But Luna Martinez, who'd given her last $17 to a stranger in the rain, who'd chosen compassion over self-preservation at her lowest moment, was exactly where she needed to be. And somewhere in that vast, complicated city, lives were about to change. Not because of miracles, but because of the simple, stubborn belief that people mattered, that circumstances could shift, and that sometimes the smallest acts of kindness could reshape entire worlds. The weeks blurred into months as Luna's team worked to transform their vision into reality. Their first pilot program launched on a crisp January morning, exactly 3 months after that rainy night when Luna had given away everything. They'd converted an old warehouse in South Seattle into a comprehensive service center, not a shelter, but something more ambitious. The space housed job training facilities, interview preparation rooms, a clothing bank, childcare services, and private counseling offices. The grand opening drew media attention, which made Luna intensely uncomfortable. She stood beside Alexander as cameras flashed and reporters shouted questions, feeling like an imposter in her professional attire. But when she saw Marcus cutting the ribbon, his hands steady and his smile genuine, she remembered why this mattered. "Ms. Martinez," a reporter called out, "some critics say this program is too ambitious, that it's trying to do too much at once. How do you respond?" Luna stepped up to the microphone. "I'd say that poverty is complicated, so solutions need to be comprehensive. You can't train someone for a job if they don't have childcare. You can't expect them to interview well if they don't have appropriate clothes. You can't ask them to focus on their future if they're worried about where they'll sleep tonight. This program addresses multiple barriers simultaneously because that's what actually works." Another reporter jumped in. "Mr. Steele, there are rumors that the board initially opposed this initiative. Is that true?" Alexander's expression remained neutral. "The board had legitimate questions about scope and implementation. We've addressed those concerns through careful planning and measurable objectives. This program will prove its value through results, not rhetoric." After the press conference ended and the last reporters left, Luna walked through the empty facility with her team. Sarah was in the childcare room, arranging toys. James was checking the computers in the training lab. Marcus was reviewing the schedule for their first week of operations. "We did it," Sarah said softly, looking around. "We actually built this." "We built the building," Luna corrected. "Now we have to make it work." The first week was chaos. They served 42 people, each with complex, interconnected challenges. Luna personally met with as many as she could, listening to their stories, understanding their barriers. There was Jennifer, a former teacher who'd lost her job due to budget cuts and spiraled into homelessness. There was Robert, a mechanic whose injury had led to pain medication, which had led to addiction, which had cost him everything. There was Diane, a domestic violence survivor who'd fled with her children and nothing else. Each story reinforced what Luna already knew. Homelessness wasn't a character flaw. It was a system failure. By the end of their first month, they'd served over 200 people. 37 had been placed in jobs, 15 had secured stable housing, and dozens more were in various stages of their programs. The numbers weren't spectacular, but they were real progress. Real lives changed. Luna was reviewing these statistics late one Friday evening when her phone rang. Alexander's name appeared on the screen. "Luna, I need you to come to the hospital. St. Mary's, now." Her blood ran cold. "What happened? Are you okay?" "I'm fine, it's Richard. He's had a heart attack." Luna grabbed her keys and drove through the dark Seattle streets, her mind racing. Richard, the board member who'd been most skeptical of her program, who'd questioned her qualifications, who'd insisted on the 6-month trial period. She'd seen him as an adversary, but Alexander's voice on the phone had carried genuine worry. She found Alexander in the surgical waiting room, his tie loosened, his usual composure cracked. "His wife called me. They were having dinner when he collapsed. The doctors say it's serious." Luna sat beside him, not sure what to say. Around them, other families waited in various states of worry and grief. It was strange seeing Alexander vulnerable, human in a way his executive persona usually obscured. "He's been at Steel Industries since my father founded it," Alexander said quietly. "He taught me how to read a balance sheet when I was 12. When my father died, Richard was the one who convinced me I could lead the company, that I was ready even when I didn't feel ready." "Alex, he's going to be okay. The doctors here are excellent." "You don't know that. Nobody knows that." Alexander ran his hands through his hair. "God, Luna, do you know what his last words to me were? This morning he called to argue about the program again. He said I was being reckless with company resources, that I was letting emotions cloud my judgment. We argued. I hung up on him." Luna understood the guilt in his voice, recognized it from every regret she'd ever carried. "You were both doing what you thought was right. He knows that." They waited for hours. Sometime after midnight, a surgeon appeared, still in scrubs. "Mr. Steele, your colleague made it through surgery. It was touch and go, but he's stable now. He'll need significant recovery time, and there will be lifestyle changes, but he should make it." The relief on Alexander's face was profound. "Can I see him?" "He's in ICU, still unconscious. Tomorrow would be better." After the surgeon left, Alexander sagged against the wall. "I need to call his wife, let her know I'm here if she needs anything. I need to." He trailed off, overwhelmed. "You need to go home and get some sleep," Luna said firmly. "There's nothing more you can do tonight. Come back tomorrow when he can actually know you're here." Alexander looked like he wanted to argue, but didn't have the energy. "Will you come with me tomorrow when I visit him?" "Of course." They walked out to the parking lot together, the night air cold and sharp. Before they parted ways, Alexander turned to Luna. "I never told you the full story about my father's death, about what happened at the end." Luna waited, sensing he needed to talk. "He called me to the hospital 2 days before he died. I thought he wanted to discuss the company, succession plans, that kind of thing. But instead he told me about his childhood, about growing up so poor that there were days he didn't eat, weeks when his family was one missed payment away from eviction. He'd never talked about it before, had always focused on how he'd succeeded, not where he'd started." Alexander's voice grew thick with emotion. He said that success had made him forget what it felt like to be desperate, that wealth had insulated him from empathy, and he made me promise that I'd never let that happen to me, that I'd find a way to stay connected to the reality of people's struggles. That's why he challenged me to live on the streets. It wasn't just about charity or understanding. It was about keeping my humanity intact. Luna felt tears stinging her eyes. He sounds like an incredible man. He was. And Richard knew him better than almost anyone. They built the company together, shared that vision of success built on innovation, but also on dignity. Alexander met her eyes. "That's why Richard's skepticism about our program hurts so much. I feel like I'm betraying his memory by fighting with Richard, but I also feel like I'm honoring my father's final wish by pushing forward. I don't know which is right." "Maybe it's both," Luna said softly. "Maybe honoring your father means having the courage to push forward, but also having the wisdom to listen to Richard's concerns. He's not your enemy, Alex. He's someone who cares about the company and about you, even when he disagrees with your methods." Alexander nodded slowly. "When did you get so wise?" "Somewhere between having nothing and having everything. Perspective is a hell of a teacher." The next day, Luna accompanied Alexander to the hospital. Richard was awake, surrounded by machines and looking shockingly frail in the hospital bed. His wife rose when they entered, hugging Alexander tightly. "I'm so glad you came," she said. "He's been asking about the company, about the quarterly reports. I keep telling him he needs to rest." Richard's voice was weak, but still carried that granite quality. "Alexander, good. We need to discuss the Martinez program. The numbers from the first month." "Richard, stop," Alexander said, pulling up a chair beside the bed. "The company can wait. You need to focus on recovery. The 6-month review is in 3 months. I need to ensure we're on track." Luna stepped forward. "Mr. Richard, with all due respect, the program will be fine. What we need is for you to get better. The company needs you healthy more than it needs you working." Richard's eyes shifted to her, that same skeptical assessment she'd seen in their first meeting. But something in his gaze had softened. "You've been putting in 18-hour days, I hear. Marcus sends me updates." Luna was surprised. "Marcus reports to you?" "I asked him to, not to spy but to understand, to see if what you were building actually worked." Richard coughed, and his wife immediately adjusted his bed. "The reports have been impressive, more so than I expected." "We're just getting started," Luna said. "There's so much more we need to do." "I know, and that's what worries me." Richard's hand trembled as he reached for water. "Not because I doubt your intentions, Ms. Martinez, but because I've seen what happens when people build empires on good intentions without sustainable foundations. Alexander's father taught me that lesson. Vision without viability is just a beautiful failure." Alexander leaned forward. "So help us build the viability. Be part of the solution instead of standing in opposition." "I'm not in opposition." Richard's voice was firm despite his weakness. "I'm in caution. There's a difference. Someone needs to ask the hard questions, to push for metrics and accountability. That's not opposition, that's partnership." Luna suddenly understood what she should have seen from the beginning. Richard wasn't her enemy. He was the balance to Alexander's idealism, the pragmatism to her passion. Every thriving initiative needed both vision and viability, dreamers and realists. "You're right," she said. "We need someone asking those hard questions. We need the accountability. I've been so focused on the mission that I haven't been focusing enough on sustainability." Richard's expression softened further. "My father was a factory worker, worked the same line for 30 years. When I got my first executive position, he told me something I've never forgotten. Don't just build something that feels good. Build something that lasts. That's what I'm trying to ensure for your program, Ms. Martinez. Not that it dies, but that it lasts." Over the following weeks, as Richard recovered, something shifted in the dynamic. He began attending meetings remotely, his questions less challenging and more collaborative. He connected Luna with non-profit leaders he knew, opened doors to funding sources, and helped refine their metrics to be more meaningful. The program continued to grow. By month 4, they'd expanded to a second location. By month 5, they'd placed over 200 people in jobs and secured stable housing for nearly 100 families. The local news ran a feature story about Jennifer, the former teacher, who'd gone from homeless to employed as an administrator in their own program. But success brought new challenges. The original budget was straining, the staff was overwhelmed, and the waiting list for services grew longer every day. Luna was back to working 18-hour days, trying to be everything to everyone. It all came to a head on a Tuesday evening in late April. Luna was in her office, reviewing applications for their next cohort, when she noticed something wrong with the numbers. They'd promised services to more people than they could actually accommodate. Someone had made a mistake in the calculations, and now they faced the choice of turning people away or overextending their resources dangerously. Her phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Sarah collapsed. Ambulance took her to St. Mary's. Exhaustion. Luna felt something break inside her. Sarah, her colleague and friend, who worked herself to exhaustion because she remembered what it felt like to live in a car with her children. Sarah, who never complained about the long hours because every person they helped represented hope. Sarah, who'd just pushed herself past the breaking point. Luna grabbed her keys and headed to the hospital. In the elevator down, her reflection in the polished doors showed someone she barely recognized. Exhausted, stressed, running on nothing but determination and coffee. She looked, in fact, a lot like the people they were trying to help. At the hospital, she found Marcus in the waiting room. "She's okay," he said immediately. "Dehydrated, exhausted, but okay. The doctors want to keep her overnight for observation." "This is my fault," Luna said, collapsing into a chair. "I've been pushing everyone too hard, including myself. We're trying to save everyone and we're destroying ourselves in the process." Marcus sat beside her. "Luna, do you remember what you said when you hired me? You said that this program would only work if we remembered to take care of ourselves too, that we couldn't help others from a place of depletion." "I said that?" "You did. And then you proceeded to ignore your own advice completely." Luna laughed, though it came out more like a sob. There are so many people who need help, Marcus. Every person I turn away, every application I have to put on a waiting list, that's someone suffering. How do I choose? How do I say no when I remember what it felt like to be desperate?" "You say no so you can keep saying yes. You set boundaries so the program survives long enough to help more people." Marcus pulled out his phone, showing her something. "Richard sent me this earlier today. He wants you to read it." It was an email, lengthy and detailed. In it, Richard laid out a proposal for expanding the program's funding through corporate partnerships and grant applications. But more importantly, he addressed the sustainability issue head-on, arguing that Luna needed to build a larger team, delegate more effectively, and establish systems that could function without her personal involvement in every decision. "He's been working on this from his hospital bed," Marcus said. "While recovering from a heart attack, he's been strategizing how to make sure this program, and you, don't burn out." Luna felt tears streaming down her face. "I don't know how to delegate. I don't know how to let go of control when I know what's at stake." "Then learn. Because Sarah's in a hospital bed right now, and you're headed there next if you don't change something. And if you both go down, who helps everyone else?" That night, Luna sat in Sarah's hospital room after her colleague woke up. "I'm so sorry," Luna said. "I should have seen how much you were taking on." Sarah shook her head weakly. "I volunteered for all of it. I wanted to prove I could handle it, that I was more than my past. I think I forgot that running from your past and taking care of your present are different things. I think we both forgot that." Luna squeezed her hand. "Things are going to change. I'm going to hire more staff, delegate more responsibility, and actually take days off. And you're going to do the same once you're recovered. Promise?" "Promise. We're building something that needs to last. Remember, Richard's father was right. We need to build something that endures, not something that burns bright and fast." The next morning, Luna called an emergency meeting with Alexander and the team. She laid out the problems honestly. They were overextended, understaffed, and heading for burnout. She presented Richard's proposal, along with her own plans for restructuring. "I need to stop trying to be everything to everyone," she admitted to the group. "I need to trust that we've built something strong enough to function without my hands in every piece of it." Alexander nodded. "I'll approve the budget increase for additional staff. And Luna, I want you to take next week off, completely off. No emails, no phone calls, no checking in. Just rest." "Alex, I can't." "You can and you will. That's not a request." His voice was firm but kind. "You're incredibly valuable to this program, but you're not invincible. Take care of yourself. That's an order." Luna took that week off, spending it with her parents in Tucson. Her father was recovering well, walking 2 miles every morning and sticking to his new diet. Her mother fussed over her, noticing immediately how thin Luna had become, how exhausted she looked. "Mia, this job is supposed to be a blessing, not a curse," her mother said one evening over dinner. "You work so hard to help others, but you forget to help yourself." "There's always one more person, Mama. Always one more story, one more need." Her father spoke up, his voice still a bit weak but growing stronger. "Luna, when I had my heart attack, you know what I thought about in that ambulance? I thought about all the extra shifts I'd worked, all the time I'd spent away from your mother and you. I thought about how I'd believed that working myself to death was the same as providing for my family. He reached across the table and took her hand. But providing for your family means being alive to see them grow. It means being healthy enough to enjoy what you've built. Don't make my mistake, Mika. Don't sacrifice yourself on the altar of helping others. Those words stayed with Luna throughout the week. She slept late, ate home-cooked meals, took long walks in the desert heat, and slowly felt her perspective shifting. The world didn't end because she took time off. The program continued functioning. Her team handled challenges without her constant oversight. When she returned to Seattle, refreshed and clearer-headed than she'd been in months, Luna found the office running smoothly. Marcus had hired 2 new case managers, and James had implemented a scheduling system that distributed workload more evenly. Sarah was back working reduced hours, but with renewed energy. "You were right," Luna told Alexander during their weekly check-in. "I was drowning in the details and missing the bigger picture. This program isn't about me being a hero, it's about building systems that work." "That's what leadership actually looks like," Alexander replied. "Not doing everything yourself, but empowering others to do it well." The 6-month review arrived in early May, and Luna stood before the board with confidence she'd earned through hard work and hard lessons. She presented their results: 312 people placed in jobs, 167 secured in stable housing, 94 reconnected with family support systems. But more than the numbers, she shared the stories: Jennifer, who was now training others; Robert, who'd been sober for 4 months and working as a mechanic again; Diane, whose children were thriving in school. "We've proven the concept works," Luna concluded, "but we've also identified areas where we need to improve: staff support systems, mental health integration, and long-term follow-up to prevent recidivism. I'm requesting approval to expand to a 2nd full year, with modifications based on what we've learned." Richard, attending his first in-person board meeting since his heart attack, leaned forward. "Ms. Martinez, I have to say that 6 months ago, I had serious doubts about this initiative. I questioned your qualifications, the program's viability, and whether we were making sound business decisions." Luna's heart sank, but Richard continued. "I was wrong, not about the need for accountability and metrics. Those concerns were valid, but I was wrong about you. You've demonstrated not just passion, but adaptability. When you hit obstacles, you didn't just push harder, you changed course. That's the mark of real leadership." He looked around the table at his fellow board members. "I move that we approve a 3-year expansion of the Community Outreach Division, with Luna Martinez continuing as director, and with increased funding for the modifications she's outlined." "I second that motion," Patricia said immediately. The vote was unanimous. After the meeting, Luna found Richard in the hallway. "Thank you," she said simply, "for the support, but also for the challenges." "You pushed me to be better," Richard smiled, looking healthier than he had in months. "That's what good partners do. They challenge each other to excellence. And Luna, you can call me Richard. I think we're past the mystery stage." The program continued to expand throughout the summer and fall. They opened 2 more locations, hired additional staff, and developed partnerships with tech companies for job placement. Luna implemented the self-care protocols she'd learned the hard way, taking weekends off and ensuring her team did the same. But more than the structural changes, something fundamental had shifted in how Luna approached the work. She'd learned that sustainable compassion required boundaries, that helping others meant also helping herself, and that the most effective solutions came from collaboration rather than individual heroism. One November evening, nearly a year after that rainy night in the doorway, Luna was leaving the office when she saw a young man sitting on the sidewalk outside, a cardboard sign beside him. She recognized that posture of defeat, that look of invisible desperation. Instead of giving him money directly, Luna crouched down beside him. "Hi, I'm Luna. I run a program that helps people get back on their feet. Are you interested in hearing about it?" The young man looked at her with surprise and suspicion. "What's the catch?" "No catch, just hard work and a chance. We provide job training, housing assistance, and support services. It's not a handout, it's a hand-up. You interested?" Something in his eyes shifted from suspicion to hope. Yeah, I'm interested. Luna handed him a card with the program's information. Come by tomorrow morning at 9. Ask for Marcus. Tell him Luna sent you. He'll get you started. As she walked to her car, Luna thought about how different this interaction was from that night with Alexander. She wasn't giving away everything she had in a single gesture of compassion. Instead, she was offering something more sustainable. A system, a process, a real path forward. Her phone buzzed. A text from Alexander. Dinner tomorrow. There's something I want to discuss with you. They met at a small Italian restaurant in Capitol Hill, the kind of place with red checkered tablecloths and candles in wine bottles. Alexander seemed nervous, which was unusual for him. So, what did you want to discuss? Luna asked after they'd ordered. Alexander took a breath. The board has been talking about expanding our charitable work beyond just the community outreach division. We want to create an entire foundation dedicated to addressing poverty and homelessness, not just in Seattle but nationally. We're talking about a $100 million initial investment. Luna felt her eyes widen. That's incredible. It is. And Luna, we want you to lead it, not just as a director but as the foundation's president. You'd have a seat on the steel industries board, full autonomy to develop programs and strategies, and the resources to make real systemic change. Luna sat back, stunned. Alex, I've been in this role for less than a year. I'm still learning, still making mistakes. And that's exactly why you're perfect for it. You haven't become jaded or disconnected from the reality of what you're addressing. You remember what it felt like to be desperate. That empathy, combined with the leadership skills you've developed, makes you uniquely qualified. He leaned forward, his expression earnest. Luna, a year ago you gave me $17.43 when you had every reason to keep it. That moment changed both our lives. Now I'm asking you to take that same spirit of compassion and scale it. Help me build something that honors my father's memory and actually addresses the systems that failed you, that failed me during those 3 months, that fail thousands of people every day. Luna felt tears welling up. I don't know if I'm ready for this. Nobody's ever ready for the moments that define their lives, but you've proven you can rise to challenges. You've proven you can learn and adapt. You've proven you care enough to do the hard work, not just the feel-good gestures. Luna thought about everything that had brought her to this moment, losing her job, losing her home, giving away her last money, meeting Alexander, building the program, learning hard lessons about sustainability and self-care. Each experience had shaped her, prepared her for something larger. Can I think about it? She asked. Of course. Take all the time you need. They finished dinner talking about other things. Richard's continued recovery, Sarah's daughter's school play, Marcus's upcoming wedding. But Luna's mind kept returning to the offer, to the weight of responsibility it represented, and the potential for real change. That night, she called her parents. Mama, Papa, I need advice. She explained the offer, the opportunity, the doubts that plagued her. Her father was quiet for a long moment before speaking. Mija, do you remember what you told me when you sent us that money for my surgery, when we said we couldn't accept it? I said family takes care of each other. No. You said, we take care of each other because that's what love looks like in action. Love in action. That's what you've been doing with this program. You've been loving people through their hardest moments by creating systems that actually help them. This foundation would let you love more people in more places. How could that be wrong? Her mother added, we raised you to see people as people, not as problems or statistics. You've never lost that even when you had nothing yourself. Trust that instinct, Mija. Trust your heart. Luna made her decision that night, though she took another week to inform Alexander. When she finally accepted the position, standing in his office with Seattle spread out below them, she felt the weight of responsibility, but also the rightness of the choice. I have conditions, she told him. Alexander smiled. Of course you do. First, Richard becomes a senior advisor to the foundation. We need his pragmatism and his wisdom. Second, my current team gets promoted to run the Seattle operations. Marcus, Sarah, and James have earned it. Third, we establish strict work-life balance policies for all Foundation employees because burnout helps no one. And fourth, we commit to hiring people with lived experience of poverty for at least 40% of all positions. Done, 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 and done. Alexander extended his hand. Welcome to the next chapter, Luna Martinez. The Foundation launched in January, exactly 1 year after Luna had given away her last $17. The press conference drew national media attention, with Luna and Alexander standing side by side to announce a comprehensive approach to addressing poverty in America. A reporter asked Luna, "Ms. Martinez, some critics say you're unqualified for this position, that your rapid rise is due more to a compelling personal story than actual expertise. How do you respond?" Luna met the camera directly. "I'd say that lived experience is a form of expertise we don't value enough in our society. Yes, my journey has been unconventional, but I understand poverty not as an abstract concept, but as a visceral reality. I know what it's like to make impossible choices, to feel invisible, to wonder if tomorrow will come. That understanding, combined with the leadership skills I've developed and the incredible team supporting me, makes me not just qualified but essential." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "We've built a culture that values certain types of credentials while dismissing others. A Harvard MBA is seen as qualification for leading a poverty initiative, but actually being poor is somehow disqualifying. That needs to change. We need leaders who understand the problems they're solving from the inside out." Another reporter called out, "What would you say to people in similar situations to where you were a year ago? People who are struggling and desperate?" Luna thought about that rainy night, about the choice she'd made to give away everything. "I'd say that compassion matters, even when it doesn't make logical sense. I'd say that helping others, even from a place of scarcity, reminds us of our own humanity. But I'd also say that individual acts of kindness, while important, aren't enough. We need systemic change. We need programs and policies that actually address root causes rather than just managing symptoms." She looked directly at the camera. "And I'd say this. Your circumstances don't define your worth. Your struggle doesn't diminish your dignity. And there are people who see you, who understand, and who are working to build systems that actually help. Don't give up. Things can change. I'm living proof of that." After the press conference, Luna stood in her new office, larger than she'd wanted, but Alexander had insisted, and looked out at the city. Somewhere down there, someone was having the worst day of their life. Someone was making impossible choices. Someone was deciding whether to give away their last money to a stranger or keep it for themselves. Luna hoped they'd choose compassion, but more than that, she hoped they wouldn't have to make that choice at all. She hoped that the systems she and her team were building would catch people before they fell that far, would provide support before desperation set in, would recognize human dignity as inherent rather than conditional. Her phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. "The kid you sent us last month, the one from outside your office. He just got his first paycheck. Wanted me to thank you." Luna smiled, typing back, "Tell him to thank himself. He did the work." But privately, she thought about the chain of compassion that had brought that young man to this moment. Luna giving Alexander money when she had none to give, Alexander offering Luna a chance when convention said he shouldn't, Luna building a program that helped others, that program saving a young man who'd been sitting outside her office, each act of compassion rippling outward, creating waves that touched lives in ways impossible to predict or measure. Over the following months, the Foundation expanded rapidly. They launched initiatives in 5 more cities, developed partnerships with major corporations for job placement, and created innovative housing models that maintained dignity while providing stability. Luna traveled constantly, meeting with local leaders, training staff, and refining programs based on feedback and outcomes. But she also maintained the boundaries she'd learned the hard way. She took weekends off. She delegated effectively. She built a team strong enough that the Foundation's success didn't depend solely on her presence or effort. Richard became her most trusted advisor, the pragmatic voice that balanced her idealism. They met weekly, his questions sharpening her thinking, her passion reminding him why the work mattered. Their relationship evolved from adversarial to collaborative to genuinely friendly. "You know," Richard said during one of their meetings, "I think about that first board meeting often. How certain I was that you weren't qualified, that Alexander was making a mistake." "You weren't entirely wrong," Luna admitted. "I wasn't qualified, at least not in traditional terms. No, I was wrong. I was measuring qualification by the wrong metrics. I was looking for credentials when I should have been looking for character. You had something that can't be taught or acquired through degrees. You had authentic understanding born from experience." He leaned back in his chair. "My father worked in a factory his entire life. I built my career trying to prove I was different from him, trying to show that I belonged in boardrooms and executive offices. But what I should have learned from him was that dignity isn't about titles or credentials. It's about how you treat people, especially when they have nothing to offer you in return." Luna felt a lump in her throat. "Your father would be proud of you, Richard. You've helped us build something that honors people's dignity." "Our fathers would be proud of both of us," Richard corrected. "We've taken their lessons and scaled them. That's what the next generation is supposed to do." As the Foundation's first year concluded, Luna looked back on the journey with wonder and gratitude. They'd served over 5,000 people across 6 cities. They'd placed nearly 2,000 individuals in jobs. They'd secured stable housing for 800 families. They'd proven that comprehensive, dignified approaches to poverty worked better than traditional models. But more than the numbers, Luna thought about the individual faces. Jennifer, now managing an entire program site. Robert, 18 months sober and mentoring others in recovery. Diane, whose children were thriving and who'd started her own support group for domestic violence survivors. Marcus, Sarah, and James leading the Seattle operations with wisdom and compassion. And Alexander, who'd risked everything on an unconventional choice, who'd trusted his instinct about a woman in a doorway more than he'd trusted conventional wisdom. Their relationship had evolved over the year, from employer and employee to colleagues to something approaching genuine friendship. They challenged each other, supported each other, and shared a vision of what was possible when compassion met strategy. On the anniversary of that rainy November night, Luna found herself walking through downtown Seattle after a late meeting. It was raining again, the same cold drizzle that had soaked her a year ago. Without quite planning to, she found herself on the same street, standing in front of the same doorway where she'd sheltered. A figure approached through the rain and Luna's breath caught. For just a moment she thought it was Alexander in his homeless disguise. But it was just a man hurrying home, collar turned up against the weather. Luna pulled out her phone and texted Alexander. "I'm standing in the doorway where everything changed. Hard to believe it's been a year." His response came quickly. "I'm 10 minutes away, wait there." He arrived in a car but got out, standing with her in the rain without an umbrella. They looked at the doorway together, then at the spot where Alexander had been sitting that night. $17.43, Alexander said softly. "That's what you had when you decided to give everything away." "Seemed like a lot at the time," Luna replied. "Seemed like nothing at the time too. Both things were true." "Do you ever regret it, giving it away?" Luna considered the question seriously. "No. Even if nothing else had happened, even if you'd just been a homeless man and I'd gone on to whatever came next, I wouldn't regret it. Because in that moment I chose compassion over fear. I chose to see another person's suffering as more important than my own comfort. That matters regardless of outcome." Alexander nodded. "You know what I think about most from that night? Not the money, but the way you looked at me. Like I was a person, not a problem. Like I mattered. That's what changed everything for me. That's what gave me hope that this work we're doing might actually succeed." They stood in the rain for a while longer, two people bound together by a chance encounter and a choice made in desperation. Around them, Seattle pulsed with life. People heading home, lights blazing in windows, the city continuing its endless cycle of struggle and hope. "We should get out of the rain," Luna finally said. "We've both learned that pneumonia doesn't help anyone." Alexander laughed. "Good point. Want to grab coffee? We can dry off and plan next year's expansion." "Actually, I'd like to just go home, take a bath, call my parents, maybe read a book." Remember how to be a person outside of this work. That's probably the healthiest thing I've heard you say in months. Alexander smiled. Same time next week for our planning meeting? Same time next week. They parted ways, each heading to their separate lives. Luna drove home through the rain, thinking about how much had changed and how much had stayed the same. She was still the same person who'd given away her last money to a stranger. She still believed in compassion over calculation, in seeing people rather than problems. But she'd also learned that sustainable change required more than individual gestures. It required systems, strategy, and the wisdom to know when to push forward and when to step back. Her apartment was warm and dry, a far cry from that doorway, but modest enough that she never forgot where she'd been. Luna ran a bath, made tea, and called her parents. They talked about ordinary things: her mother's garden, her father's fishing trip with old friends, her cousin's upcoming wedding. Not everything had to be about the work, the mission, the foundation. Sometimes life was just life, and that was enough. Before bed, Luna stood at her window looking out at the city. She thought about the young man she'd sent to Marcus, about Jennifer and Robert and Diane and countless others whose lives had changed because someone had seen them, had cared enough to help, had built systems that actually worked. She thought about Alexander, still driven by his father's final challenge, still trying to honor that memory through action rather than sentiment. She thought about Richard, learning to measure success by impact rather than just efficiency. She thought about her team, each person bringing their own experiences and perspectives to the work. And she thought about that moment in the rain when she'd had $17.43 and a choice to make. She'd chosen compassion, and that choice had created ripples she could never have imagined. But more importantly, that choice had been right regardless of outcome. It had been right because seeing another person's humanity and responding to it was always right, even when it cost everything. Luna climbed into bed, exhausted but content. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities, new people who needed help and new systems to build. But tonight, she could rest in the knowledge that she was exactly where she needed to be, doing exactly what she was meant to do. Outside, the rain continued falling on Seattle, washing the streets clean, nourishing the earth, sustaining life in all its complex forms. And somewhere in that vast city, someone was making a choice about compassion over comfort, about seeing others or looking away, about giving or withholding. Luna couldn't control what choices they made. All she could do was keep building systems that made compassion easier, that caught people before they fell too far, that recognized dignity as inherent rather than earned. It was enough. It had to be enough. And somehow, impossibly, it was more than enough. It was everything.